Teachers of Reddit, what is the most depressing thing a student has told you about their home life? My students were debating on what hurt the worst when being beaten by their parent. The whole conversation was disturbing to say the least, but one kid won when he mentioned the cord for the television. He even stood up and proved it by removing his shirt and showing the scars. Looked like Django. It went from students laughing to complete silence and then crying. One of my best students in one class showed up late after I had a slew of students rolling in late, and I had said there would be consequences for the next ones. I walked over to talk to him and he almost started crying, so we stepped outside and I angled him away from the class and asked what was up. Turns out he had been kicked out of the house, living in his car, his phone had died, and that was his alarm. And he felt terrible about being late. I told him that I was so proud of him for making it into class, and I was going to make angry faces and make it look like I was mad, so the class didn't think I was going back on my word, but that he was awesome and could take a few minutes to collect himself and join us when he was ready. I think I even waved my arms in the air a bit to ham it up. That dude aced my class. He was amazing. I once had a student show up late every day for class in first period. I asked him after class that his tardiness is becoming his issue. He said he is doing the best he can, he has to help raise his younger siblings. He says his dad was an alcoholic and his mom lives in another state. He said he has to help his 3 younger siblings go to school and drop them off because his father is usually passed out drunk. I had a student not come to school for 2 weeks when he finally showed he was limping and his foot was wrapped up in a large dirty ace bandage. I called him to my office after school that day to check in on him. He told me that he had been in the river fishing for his dinner 2 weeks ago and slipped on a rock. He cut his foot so badly that he couldn't walk until today to make it to school. I asked about going to the doctor, but he hadn't seen his parents in so long that he didn't know how to get to them for help getting to the hospital. I called CPS, got him help, as much as they could offer. We found out he was living in a tent BC. The house had been foreclosed on when his parents disappeared. A bunch of teachers chipped in and got him groceries, clothes and started driving him places after that. Today, over 2 years later, he's working a job and one of our teachers still clothes and feeds him. The student is too prideful to live with anyone and kind of couch hops now. But he's so strong and resilient. He's an incredible human, and I think he will change the world one day. This was a few years ago. This student came into class one day really late and escorted my some official. He threw his bag on the ground and sat in his seat frowning. Turns out, the day before he went home and his foster parents had decided they no longer want him, so he went into the care of social services. Everything about this child went downhill from there. I was also in an interview with a mother and her son, and she straight up tells us that she's not too concerned about her son, as he's not her favorite child. The defeated look on her son's face still tears me up. The fact that people like this are able to have kids while loving people struggle to conceive is fricked up on a cosmic scale. This is what has killed me for so many years. Husband and I just finished the licensing process to foster adopt in our state. I'm infertile, so here we go. Hope we can help some kids. Got a message today about why a student could not come to class yesterday. Sorry I couldn't come to class, there were gunshots right outside my apartment and I thought I was going to die. The police did come eventually and I had to give a statement. I will get the work from yesterday done today. Thanks. Yay, you get that extension. It's so very sad that the kid thinks that is the biggest thing that you will worry about. The work that he didn't do yesterday. Poor kid. I've noticed when students encounter trauma, they either dive headfirst into schoolwork as a form of escapism or become completely disengaged, even from their peers. Mental health of students is something I consider with each lesson, especially right now. School counselor here. My second year I had a courageous student who suffered from a rare, debilitating disease. She didn't have many friends because she was never in school and always in hospitals. She loved reading though. She brought books with her to the hospital. Unfortunately, due to the disease, her eyesight was now deteriorating and she knew she would eventually go blind. She cried in my office that she would miss her books and didn't want to be alone in the dark. I couldn't help crying with her. She transitioned to audio books on her iPod. This was roughly 14 years ago, a time when middle schoolers didn't have smartphones. A year later she passed away. My hope is she's at peace, reading all the books she wants, with other friends she's met. Be kind to your students. The 7 hours they have in school may be the best 7 hours of their day. We are never certain what goes on in their homes. I am hungry. How much time until the break? Kid who didn't have food at home. I will quit school and become a criminal because robbing is the only thing I'm good at. Teenager who had a very bad situation at home. I was a teacher at a public school in a poor region in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and many children had problems at home. Many of them didn't have a father, lived in small houses in the slums, etc. The first child didn't have food at home. All teachers knew about it. His mother had a lot of problems, and all his siblings were in the same situation, so every day the most important thing for him was to eat, obviously. The teenager apparently had food, but there was a history of violence in his family, and he had already committed crimes, and he probably felt empowered by it because he apparently felt bad and stupid in other activities. I wasn't the regular teacher, I was part of a NGO that offered specific attention to students that were behind the others, so every day I would go to their regular class and pick 6 to 10 of them to have special classes, so at the beginning they felt really bad and other students were calling them stupid. At the end of the program many students wanted to join us, and our students felt much more confident in general, so it was great, but obviously we didn't solve the hunger problem, and this teenager wasn't convinced that he had a future out of crime. My son started school in September and doesn't eat breakfast, his choice, and won't eat the snack, fruit, so he's always starving by lunchtime, and it honestly worries me that the school will think he's not being fed at home. I never ate breakfast since first grade, some people just don't like eating in the morning. Taught at an inner-city charter school. Had a bright 6th grade girl who started sleeping during my classes, which was not like her. When I asked after school what was up, she told me that her family, her 2 younger sisters, and crackhead mom, moved into the homeless shelter, and the last time she slept through the night, all their stuff got stolen. Aw shoot, we had a kid like that. He slept every day, and the principal told me that the family got robbed at a homeless shelter, so they were squatting in a vacant house. It was his job to stay up all night and keep lookout. He was 12. We let him sleep in the nurse's office. Ada. This was in Detroit, circa 2008. So right after the big crash, there was just nothing. Not that there is ever much. A few weeks ago one of my online kids had a band-aid on her left temple, so I asked what happened. She said my mom was angry with me and threw a pencil and it stuck in my head, with blood. A female university student in China told me her mother tried to sell her for $8 as a baby. I told a kid I was gonna call his parents because he was acting out in class. His response? If you find them, let me know where they're at. 100% that kid was lonely, bored, and neglected and needed attention. I had a girl playing with something while sitting at the carpet. Rolling it back and forth and putting it in her mouth and taking it out and rolling it around again. I told her to give it to me when the other students started their independent work. She gave me this large green pill. At recess I ask her about it, and she says her mom and dad give her and her siblings one of these every night to make them sleep. I take the pill to admin and tell them what she told me before searching Google Images to find out what it could be. I find a short list and go back to admin, and I'm told it isn't my job to worry about that. I try several times that day to get answers, and they say they think it's melatonin, so stop overstepping my place. This girl and her siblings are in and out of foster care and come to school with no food and filthy clothes. She came to school in a sweatshirt covered in dried blood 3 days in a row. Her parents wouldn't even sign the papers to get the kids the free school lunches. I forged the mom's signature every month. Thank you for looking out for those kids. I sincerely hope you never got in trouble for it. My mom is an English teacher and once told me about a child, 13 meters, whose mother had committed suicide a few years ago. In a creative writing task a few years after it happened, the question revolves around finding out a secret. The boy then wrote a descriptive piece about finding a body hanging in his front room, lifelessly swinging. Heartbreaking stuff. He had his counselors upped and said he just write it from the heart. Poor guy. I had an essay I had to write about the hardest thing I've ever had to overcome or some generic shoot like that. The abuse I went through wasn't exactly school appropriate, so the only thing I could think of was having to take care of my mother after my dad killed himself because she couldn't hold herself together. Mind, I was sexually abused by him for years, but I had to deal with CPS, school forcing weekly therapy on me with someone who sucked at her job, my own trauma, etc. But I couldn't just say yeah dealing with a pedophile killing himself and having to seem sad and also running the house for like 2 weeks, so I ended up just talking about being told about it and like how hard it was to lose a dad or something. Other people talked about not making a school sports team, their like 100-year-old grandparents dying, and normal life things. Oops. I don't want to give out too many details, but I've had to fill out 4 CPS reports in my 4 years of teaching. 3 for students that either confided in me or had signs that they were being physically abused, and 1 that was sexual abuse from the child's father. It's honestly the worst part of the job, having to hear and see just the awfulness some kids have to go through. Last year I was student teaching and I had to call. The whole week after I was so sad for my student. It was awful. At the end of my term the student said I wish you were my mommy. It broke my heart. It was my first year teaching and the holidays were approaching. A 2nd grade student asked me why Santa visits everyone else's home, but skips hers. On Christmas Eve, my father and I played Santa. We dropped off gifts at their home for each child, with of course the permission of the legal guardian's parents were in jail. When I was in 2nd grade my principal called me into his office one day just to ask me how many siblings I had. I was confused, and when I told my mom she just assumed it was a question for the free lunch program. But that Christmas Eve my principal dressed up as Santa and dropped off 2 trash bags of toys. My mom cried because she and my dad had no money that year. I promise you, those presents meant a lot to those kids. Because they meant so much for me. Keep doing what you do. A student's mother shows up for the first time in almost a year, and she's well dressed and looking like someone straight out of a fashion magazine. Had the latest phone, flashy jewelry, overall expensively dressed. The student on the other hand was always shabbily dressed and once went without a blazer for a week because his parents weren't buying him one. We allowed him to wear his sports jersey in the class, which is normally not allowed, and constantly called the parents to no avail. She showed the slightest possible interest in her child, telling us to make him study however we wanted and even hinted hitting him if he didn't behave. A lot of talking and counseling later it turned out that the student was actually from a well-to-do family, but the parents didn't get along well. Father went out on business trips for weeks together where he was having multiple affairs, and the mother was doing the same at home. It was an open secret. The child acted weird just to get some attention in school which he wasn't getting at home. I really felt for the child. He was 11 at the time. Taught summer workshops for teens for a few years. These workshops were based on electives and were rather pricey for students to attend. In complete honesty it was really just bogey summer daycare, and I always felt bad for the teens because admin were super neurotic about the education, so the curriculum was boring as frick. They're kids, they want to spend their summers having fun, but rich helicopter parents expect differently. One year I had this absolute monster of a kid. He was 13, rowdy, inappropriate, didn't do any work, constantly throwing things around, etc. Admin tried to boot him, but his grandma had begged us to keep him on board. Since they were paying good money, admin agreed under the terms that we just leave him alone. I didn't agree with that at all. No kid should just be ignored, so I didn't. I would always try to encourage the kid's weird jokes and interests and would take him on a walk around the school grounds every day. I always gave back as good as I got with the sass, and he got a kick out of it. We explored weird classrooms and kicked around rocks and joked about whatever YouTube videos he was into. We got to talking and he started to trust me, and he told me about his life. His parents both worked in the airline industry, and as a result they were filthy rich with homes all over North America, but they were never home. During the school year he was mostly alone with them popping in here and there, and in the summers they would fly him to his grandma who lives in our dinky city, and she would care for him for the summers before he would get flown out to wherever the frick his parents were staying for a couple days to pretend they were a loving family. Then the cycle would repeat. He was so aggressively lonely, didn't believe anyone cared about him, and was constantly acting out. He would skateboard all over the surrounding cities for a couple of summers. I would run into him in the most weird places and weird times. Think outside shooty bars on late Saturday nights, randomly in the huge metro city in the middle of the week, driving by him skateboarding on the side of the highway, etc. He had no one looking after him and no concern for his own well-being and safety. The absolute lack of care or concern for him was heartbreaking, and I tried to do what I could, but ultimately his parents didn't actually break any laws based on his home state rules and regulations, and his parents are, again, filthy rich. He was well provided for, and how nice was it that they sent him to this expensive summer workshop. I still think about him now and then, even though it's been years. I hope he's okay. My mom taught in a very low-income school and every year would go to the dollar store and pick up Christmas presents for all of her students. She knew that many of them didn't get any other gifts for the holiday. She also had stories about how they needed to be careful when constructing standardized tests because there were students who might answer a question like "What do you do when you're hungry with go to bed" or similar things. I have a friend in education and they do a secret Santa for the most in need kids and the siblings of those kids. She says you can tell the ones who won't get anything on Christmas Day as they save the gift to open at home. Likewise, they also have issues with standardized testing. One English essay topic was to write about a recent holiday with an example that featured a flight, hotel, the pool, etc. Many of these kids had never experienced a big holiday like that and were confused by the question. I had a 10-year-old crying and wishing she was dead. Her older brothers at home were being awful to her, bullying and hitting her. She was saying I should just let her go so she could kill herself, and then she wouldn't be a bother to us or her brothers anymore. Sat her down with the teacher, a cup of tea, some cookies, and talked with her throughout the afternoon. Not much we could do about the brothers, but she left with a smile and came back at school the next day with a smile as well. Now I'm just keeping my eye on her in case things go bad again, but so far so good. Apparently talking to us encouraged her to tell her mother about everything that happened, so at least someone at home also kept an eye out for her. I work with significant disabilities and autism in an elementary school, and we have one student who at the end of the day when we say it's time to go home, almost always piped up time to go home and to bed. We get out of school at 2 p.m. As I understand it from a coworker who knows someone who worked with the family since he has a younger brother, were toddlers, mom sends them both to bed immediately and, we're guessing here, they lay in bed and watch YouTube on tablets. The younger brother actually has mild leg deformities because he was never allowed out of his crib to walk as a toddler, so his legs are bowed. And before someone asks, no, this is not enough for CPS to do anything. Edit. Bonus time fair warning: don't read if you have a weak stomach. Have another student, who also has a brother in another class in the same situation, who comes to school with pants so tight it's like the old Victorian era women needing their maids to put a boot in their back to get their corset closed. First day we comment to mom. But eventually we're like, okay, they broke af, we're just going to leave the button undone, and it's not too bad. Well, one day brother eats poop. Literally reaches into his pull-up, they are 8 and 10 BTW, and grabs some and chomps down while walking at recess. Happened too fast for us to grab him. So we are pretty alarmed and call mom. Response? I told y'all to keep his pants buttoned. This woman puts pants on them so small that some of the paras physically do not have the strength to button them. Instead of taking the time to teach her kids a dang thing, they also don't know how to feed themselves. To be clear, one of them is doing math. They aren't low functioning enough for these skills to not exist. Neither of them are capable of responding to a verbal question in any way either. Like the one brother can point to an answer or point to what he wants. But neither of them can speak, and neither of the know how to shake their head, thumbs up, down, anything. The sad truth in this demographic is that their disability is rarely what holds them back. It's the parents. Both sets of brothers I spoke about here would likely be in resource classrooms if their parents were worth a dang. Well, one of them likely not, but the other three for dang sure. The little boy who stays in bed is in first grade and is the highest academically of all our SDA kids, 1st to 5th. That's so heartbreaking to hear that CPS won't do anything. I'm sure they have lots on their plates already, but he's got leg deformities. Mild or not, that seems insane to me. Good on you for doing the work you do though, it must be tough at times, but hopefully rewarding and you're feeling good. I feel like you'd be blown away by what CPS doesn't deal with, maybe specifically in low-income communities. His parents would only give him a pillow and blankets for his bed if he had all A's. I contacted the school counselor and it was true, along with the fact that all of the food was locked away and he was only given specific amounts per day. Per DCFS, this was not considered abuse. I made a deal with him that as long as he was doing his best, his grade would never drop below an A. He teared up. The best I could tell, he only had 2 sets of clothing that he rotated every other day. Not a teacher but a student. I was absent a lot, but always handed him an excuse note the next day. One day he came to me with all of them and told me that none of the signatures matched and therefore had to be forged somehow. I told him it was because sometimes my mom was really tired when I get her to sign it. In reality, sometimes she was too high to hold a pen and could barely scratch her name for me. Anyway, by the end of the school year it was very obvious to all my teachers that my mother had a drug problem. And when he took his proof to the office, they informed him that my mother had called in every one of my absences. He apologized the next day. Not a teacher but I remember from high school. I told a friend I was proud of him for his work outside of school. He teared up and thanked me because he hadn't been told someone was proud of him. I imagine that he couldn't remember another time. Also his dad was a real dick to him, so it's possible he'd never been told that before. That hit me right in the feels and I don't think I'll ever forget that. I taught a student that had intellectual disabilities. For example, I had a test question that was who is the founder of Buddhism? And the choices were me, the principal, the assistant principal, and the correct answer. He came back from his accommodation room and said I chose you for the last question. And didn't understand why that was bad. Admin had called him in to discuss things with him before, and talking to him never led to anything because it was like herding cats. One morning while walking to class he said, "Hey MR. You fungineer, this morning my poppy tried to choke me, threw me on the ground, and took my phone." That's really dark. Hope the kid is doing okay now. Every week, I'd let students earn raffle tickets which would potentially allow them to choose a prize, such as bringing in a show and teller picking a prize from my treasure chest. Anyways, one day, a student brings in her favorite doll. This leads all the girls to start talking about their favorite dolls. One student privately tells me that she never had a doll before. This made sense because the child was homeless, wore the same dirty outfit nearly every day, often stole from teachers and classmates because she became adapted to survival of the fittest mode and her parents were out of the picture. That night I went to Toys R Us right after school. The next week I made sure this girl won a prize and stocked my treasure chest with a brand new teacher and student Barbie set. Well, this child picked the Barbie right away. The most touching part about this story was when she asked if she could show and tell her new Barbie. I said sure. At the beginning of her show and tell, she introduced the student Barbie as her name and the teacher Barbie as being my name. I was so touched. Lots of sad stories. I was one of those students. School nurse saw markings on my back and asked what they were. I told her I got beat at home, which I did for the smallest mistakes when not living with my dad, who often went to rehab. Cop came and checked my whole body for more marks, then social workers showed up while I was babysat by a nice old couple. Nothing ended up happening, but I definitely got in trouble and received different types of punishment that didn't leave marks on me. Absolutely hate how CPS does that. Oh. An obviously abused child, how about I question their parents and when they say everything is fine I leave without a trace. I tutor Chinese children online. Some of them get sent to private boarding schools when they hit middle school. Most do 3 to 4 hours of homework a night and have classes Saturday and Sunday. One boy is 11 years old. When I ask what he does for fun, his only response is homework. He doesn't play video games or watch TV or movies. His parents force him to study and read all day, every day. The only time he plays with other children is when they eat lunch or have PE class. I have some other students like this, but they live at home. Some of my kids are taught that the cinema is a waste of time, video games and cartoons are bad, and they need to study all weekend to get into a good university. The children can be like zombies. It is difficult sometimes seeing them have no joy. One girl said the highlight of her week was that she didn't get assigned a lot of homework this weekend. I had a girl miss several lessons last term. I was concerned about her progress in class and followed up on the absences. Next time I saw her, we had a wee chat and she said she was really struggling with home stuff. The following day, she appeared very early with a letter and asked me to read it after she left. The letter stated that she was unable to tell her story out loud, but she wanted me to know. Her story detailed a difficult home situation. I have redacted the details out of respect for the pupil, as I had no idea this would become so popular and well-read. It completely floored me. I had lessons starting in 15 minutes, but I couldn't stop crying. It felt awful that this strong, silent young girl could brave coming to class with the weight of this on her shoulders. So we worked out how to make school feel safer for her. She struggles to be around lots of people and near doorways without a trusted adult nearby. She's terrified that he appears in school to take her. So we spend our break and lunch in my class, playing games and watching silly videos on YouTube. If she has a bad day, I'll walk her to her bus. I make sure she's seated away from the door and nearby a friend or my desk. It's not much, but every little bit helps her feel safer. Thank you so much for your kind words. A few commenters were concerned regarding her safety. To clarify, safeguarding pupils is a massive part of my job. The correct agencies were informed, and she is currently getting counseling sessions to work through her situation. The police are informed, and the entire school is doing the best it can to protect her. Hope you all have a lovely Halloween. Right now I'm super struggling with a student who wants to do well, comes to advisory, gets a bunch done when he comes to class. But he doesn't attend most days, and when he does, his baby sister is on his lap. His mom has a baby last winter, and she works 2 jobs. This student also has a near full-time job. It seems like he is the primary caretaker of a 9-month-old. I sent him an application for a year-long daycare scholarship, but I don't know if he can get mom to fill it out.